Hello and welcome back to my Nälbinding for beginners. This time we're going to learn the York stitch. Now here's an example of the York stitch with my first and very dodgy mitten. As you can see, it's somewhat different to the Oslo. The Oslo looked more braided in my view, and this one, some say it looks like straw, or you can see all the little holes, a little bit beehive-like perhaps. Anyway, that's what York stitch looks like. As you can see, it has a natural twist to it. So in order to get your items straight, you would probably need to block them. And I would think wet block them. Anyway, let's get started on how to do the York stitch. Now, the other thing I'll point out quickly with the York stitch is that, well, as with all the stitches, you can either thumb tension or needle tension them. And that goes to how small and tight your stitches are. So here's an example of a rather loose, this is thumb tensioned York stitch, and you can see how big and loose those stitches are. And then this here is a needle tensioned piece of York stitch. So if I untwist that, you can see that row of stitches there. But you can see just how twisted it gets. The tighter your stitches are, the tighter the twist seems to be. So anyway, and let's get started on how to do the York stitch. So first of all, we do the same quick start that we did with the Oslo stitch. So overhand knot, like so. We put that on our thumb, tail at the back, working yarn at the front, and going down the left-hand side of our thumb. Now, with the Oslo, you started with one loop. You always had one loop on your thumb. With this one, you will always have two. So we'll do another loop by bringing our needle down behind the back of our thumb loop, pushing that through, pulling forward, and we've now got two loops on our thumb. Okay, so two loops stay on our thumb. We now need a third loop to work the York stitch. So we go down again behind the back of our thumb loop, this time the two thumb loops, under the working yarn, and pull forward, and now we've got 3 stitches on our thumb. So to get started, we now pull that top loop off and leave 2 loops on our thumb. Now to work the York stitch, we take our needle and we go straight down behind our 2 thumb loops there. So I'll try to show you that from every angle. Straight down the back behind the 2 loops, ignoring that loop behind the thumb and just worrying about those 2. So we go down the back under the working yarn and pull forward. So if you're thumb tensioning the York stitch, this one can be quite fast. Off with the loop. Again, we go down behind both the thumb loops and the working yarn and pull forward. Top loop off, down the back behind both loops and pull forward. And that is it for the York stitch. So I find it quite easy. I think the only tricky part with the York stitch is that it gets so twisted, so it can then be more challenging to join in the round. But the stitch itself is fairly easy, in my opinion. So I'll do that again. We go down the back of both stitches, under the working yarn, nothing else, only those 2 stitches in the working yarn, and pull forward, ignoring the loops on the back as you pull them off your thumb. Let them just do their thing behind your thumb there. So down behind both loops, behind and under the working yarn, and pull forward. Top loop off, and again, as with the Oslo stitch, the bottom loop is always your working loop. So make sure that one is the one that can be tightened, and that is your bottom loop. So down underneath the 2 thumb loops and the working yarn, pull down and forward. Top loop off. And you can just, as you pull those loops off of your thumb, you can just gently pull them back so that they're out of your way, like this, so that you're only worrying about the 2 loops on your thumb and your working yarn. So we go down behind the back of those 2 thumb loops, under the working yarn, and we pull down and we pull forward. Top loop off, and just push that behind. Down behind those 2 loops, under the working yarn, pull forward, top loop off. And you just continue in this way until you have a row of York stitch, as long as you need it to be. Top loop off. Now, if I take that off there, as you can see, if I don't do anything to it, it just looks like a big mass of loops. If I straighten it out, you will see that we have our row of York stitch, like so.